Mike Bobo got off to a slow start. They finally figured it out.
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Georgia Bulldogs football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tanisha Batiste. Alongside me are Jarvis Davis and Brian Gephardt. This episode of the Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by Ultimate College Football HC. It's a brand new mobile game that's completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Begin your coaching legacy today. The Atlanta Football Party is also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, that defense might just be them, especially if they can withstand man down. We'll discuss, and we'll give a few more flowers from last Saturday before moving on to this Saturday. But first, let's talk about how the Bulldogs won big in week 1. So now that you've had a chance, Brian and Jarvis, to take a look at the film post-game, maybe notice single man high and zone Clemson employed to first load up on the run. You may have said, well, that's why the Dogs only had 34 yards on 11 rushing attempts in that first half. But what adjustments, Brian, did Kirby Smart and Mike Bobo make in the second half that allowed the Dogs to gain 135 yards on 16 carries to go with 2 touchdowns in that second half?
Yeah, it was a good defensive plan from Clemson there in the first half, like you had mentioned. I mean, they played really well, and they came after, especially that defensive front. They were really playing well. In the second half, honestly, a lot of it was just execution, simply. I mean, like actually getting those end arounds when they had Aron Smith and Dylan Bell in that first drive. The first drive of the second half is what you hope the first drive of the first half looked like for Georgia as they came out and were able to do everything that they wanted to, finishing off with Colby Young there. And it was also nice to see shades of a number 8 wide receiver for Georgia fans. There was like a little nostalgia in that as you saw that pass go to Colby Young. But yeah, they were able to actually execute going east and west, which they were trying to do in the first half, which then opened up everything else in the middle as the second half developed.
Yeah, and for you, Jarvis, when you kind of look at what Kirby Smart, Mike Bobo were able to do at halftime, how do you feel like their adjustments allowed the Dogs to gain as much as they did and have so much success on the ground in the second half?
Well, first off, in the second half, they put the second highest rated running back in the country for the 2024 freshman class in the game, and Nate Frazier, because we understand that it just looked different when he was in the game in that first half. I was like, okay, he averaging about 5 yards a pop. So, man, this dude need to get a little bit more touches in the second half, and you saw them make that. And I thought that, people not really talking about it as much as from what I saw, I thought that Carson Beck was a little bit more efficient. I thought he was more timely with his throws. I thought he was putting catchable balls out there. Not that he was throwing the ball all over the place in the first half, but I think that for him to be able to make those, I think he had opportunity to make a couple of throws in the first half. In the second half, he was definitely making those throws. As far as, for example, with the Colby Young, the overthrow in the red zone. I thought that could have been a little bit of better throw, give your receiver a little bit better chance to catch the football. And then to Dom Lovett. We know the chemistry that those two have. And Dom even mentioned it. They said he talked about it on the broadcast how he was like, hey man, what could I have done better? And Beck was like, nah, I gotta throw a better ball. And then when you think about it from that aspect of it, he understands that. And then because when you're being efficient throwing the football, that automatically opens up the run game, because we, like BG mentioned, we know that defensive line was really good. Woods and all those boys, man, those big boys up front, they were working the Georgia offensive line in that first half. So, but once you start to see the quarterback, come together and get his stuff together, and then you start, like you mentioned, you go start going east-west, kind of stretch that defense out, and then you hit them with the verticals. They start connecting on the vertical stuff. It's just automatic adjustments. That's what did the trick. I think it was a combination of all of those things to where we saw they gained 150 yards in the 2 drives, with they only hit 160 in the first half. So you understand the efficiency that offense was working with, and I think it was a lot of factors that went into that.
And JD, speaking of the passing game, Kirby Smart said Monday, quote, Aron has been a great case study in that because he's touched the ball vertically, as you mentioned. He's touched the ball sideways. He's become a more complete receiver and route runner. So for you, what do you think about the growth of Aron Smith's game that you've already seen this season?
It's one of the benefits of guys who've been in this program, right? When you think about, understanding what Kirby Smart wants, understanding what the culture is, and being able to relay that to the young guys too, because that's a thing that people don't really talk about as much as well. Each one teach one. Like, because Kirby don't want to have to teach the culture and teach how to do things to every incoming freshman. That could be a little exhausting if you really think about it. So for those guys that have been there, done that, they understand, hey, I need to tell these guys, how things are done here, because they were told how things were done when they came in. So for me, I think it's and becoming more of a polished route runner as well. Understanding that fact of it, because those track guys, I've seen plenty of them, right? Like, they all the same. Super fast. Oh yeah, come out here and play football, and it's all good. No,
you can come do it. Yeah, everybody can. Yeah, you can run fast. You can do it. Okay. Yeah.
You got to be able to stop and start too. You can't just run in a straight line. You got to understand how to break people off in routes and everything, and timing that thing up and getting in that cohesion between you and the quarterback too. So I think that for Aron, he has really benefited from being around his Georgia program for so long, and then Kirby understanding what he needs to do to be able to, get to that point where, hey, you're not just a one-trick pony. So I think a combination of those two things is why we saw Aron Smith be a key contributor on Saturday.
Man, I was fascinated to see that it was the beginning of the first half and the beginning of the second half where it was just Aron Smith, like, getting him involved. And I'm never a big fan of, because they talked about how the coaching staff says he might not always be engaged in that way of, like, you have to get him going, which I don't love players that are like that, especially on the offensive side, when it's kind of like, okay, if you got to, like, force and manufacture touches. But if he is able to start to put together routes like he did, I think it was early in the fourth, that comeback route he had, that was about 10 yards. And, like, that's the type of thing where if he's able to do that and actually catch the football each time, like, this really can open up the offense quite a bit. I was actually shocked at how much he was just utilized and targeted, and that being a specific focus of having him in the game. But he does add a different element than a lot of the receivers on this team don't. He does have that vertical threat of, okay. And it was interesting to see not only him, but it spread across. Again, we saw it to number of different targets, number of different receivers were involved in this game. But if Aron Smith can develop like that, which I'll be honest, I'm not a believer in it. I still don't believe it. I want to see it throughout the course of a season, but it's interesting that he was such a big part of this game plan going into Clemson.
Indeed. And the guy who helped to make that happen for him, obviously, was Carson Beck, and the play that we saw from him, especially in the second half, BG. But what do you think about what we would call our first look, at least in the regular season, of the second year of the Carson Beck-Mike Bobo combo?
Yeah, I mean, first half was a little tough just because you're kind of like, okay, just get it going. You just wanted to see something across the middle there in the first. And the only thing you really saw was that one, I think it was 2nd and 15 or 16, and he hit Dylan Bell on this perfect pass across the middle. It kind of finally got the offense going a little bit there. So it was still a little too east and west for me early on, where it was like, okay, let's get something across the middle, even if it was to one of the tight ends or something, where it felt like it was more of a simple game plan. And for Beck, it should be a little bit more of an advanced of a game plan. Obviously, everything opened up in the second half and the defense playing the way that it did. So it wound up working out great. So I was mildly okay with it. I still wanted to see more, even though it's weird to see, a 34-3 final, but I still want more. I'm greedy. I need more a little bit from this combo.
Yeah, you have a high.
Travis, do you?
Like Mike, man, listen to your boy. It's Josh speaking right now. Mike, I know you listen to the show. I know you'll get down on Tuesdays. This is your appointment listening for you. I need you to understand that you have a Heisman candidate as your quarterback. Like, it's okay to throw open the run game. I know Kirby might be barking at you, a little bit in your ear, but like, hey man, let me do me. You brought me here for a reason. I know what I'm doing when it comes to play calling. So I think that it has to be more of a catering your offense to what you have. And what you have is an NFL style quarterback. So let's see that. I know you want to establish the run game, but the way that defensive line was getting off in that first half, man, I'm not saying cut bait with the game plan, but we gotta back these guys up because there was no way that you should be like T mentioned earlier, single high safety. Come on, man. You got Aron Smith, Dom Lovett, London Humphrey, Kobe. Yo, you got all these weapons that you can utilize to back those guys up so they can get out of it, so they can go back to some too high and try to make sure, hopefully, and hope that their defensive line can continue to dominate up front when it comes to the run game. So yeah, I'm telling Mike, man, PSA, brother, open that thing up from the get-go.
Yeah.
And I feel like you'll be in games because Carson Beck is not a guy to turn the ball over like that if that's what you're scared of. He handles the football with care.
Right. And I thought from that perspective as well, like there was one stat, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, but the one stat of Carson Beck being able to get it to, nine different targets. But then I thought to myself, yeah, but that was mostly in the second half. So I don't think BG is being greedy. JD, I think you make an excellent point as well. We need to see that from the first possession. You can establish, just like we always talk about establishing the run, when you have Carson Beck and you've seen what kind of weapons he has, it's okay to establish the pass. That's not a bad way to go either when you've got the weapons that you do and the guy who is actually able to chunk it all up and down the field to those weapons. Now, the defense, although we saw good things from that offense, man, the defense might just beat them, especially if they can withstand man down. We'll go between the hedges to discuss. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by Ultimate College Football HC Ultimate GM. Now, look at Locked On Bulldogs just like you look at us, right? So fans of that show, fans of this show, we want you to check something out. We want you to take a moment to go and look at a brand new mobile game. We think you're going to like it as much as we do. Now, in this game and simulation, you get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine actually being the head coach of the Georgia Bulldogs and being able to do whatever it is that you would have wanted to do in last week's game, just as an example, to run up the score and get the offense going, from recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps and handling school scholarships? You control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Will you be able to handle the pressure? And here's what we really love about the game. You are responsible for calling offensive plays during the games. In other words, you can be Mike Bobo. Your strategy will not only determine the success of your football team and the season, but will shape the future and legacy of the program. So Ultimate College Football HC is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. So you can play on the go as you want and when you want to. And of course, we have a special offer for Locked On Bulldogs fans. Use the promo code Locked On CFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com, ultimate-cfb.com, or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate College Football HC, bring your coaching legacy today. So guys, we cannot have a show without talking about this Dogs defense, because I know this is your happy place. I know this is what you guys are always excited to talk about. And, we talked about this pre-production, how there are so many good things that we saw in this defense overall that it might be tough to pick winners or losers or even one impressive thing. But Jarvis, I'm going to challenge you to pick the most impressive thing about how UGA was able to hold Clemson to just 3 points, especially in the passing game where they held Cade Klubnik to only 142 yards and, of course, picked him off.
Oh, wow. I got to start with the freshman safety, right? You talking about KJ Bolden out-snapping everybody on defense? He had the most snaps on defense. To the point where here's how you know a guy is truly important in what this defense is trying to do this year, and particularly, this year. When you move Malachi Starks to the star position and have KJ Bolden come in at free safety, and now I'm not talking about no regular old Joe Blow's free safety. I'm talking about dude go in the first round, top half of the first round this year in the 2020, 2025 NFL draft. If you're doing that to get him on the field, that lets you know this young man is an important piece that is going to drive this defense to being one of the greatest Georgia Bulldogs defense that we've seen in the past few years, right? So for me, I feel like for him to go out there and do what he did and not say, man, what was he doing on that particular play? You never had heard those words in his first collegiate game on national TV against a team that has won 2 national championships, haven't been all that great lately, but this is a storied program with Dabo Swinney and all that stuff. So when you think about what he was able to do and come in and you say, oh man, that was a great tackle. Oh man, he coming down here. You know, he put that quarterback, put that big old running back right on the ground like he was supposed to. You know, and when a guy like Phil Moffitt, you know how big this dude is. He's not a slouch whatsoever. So when you think about it from that standpoint, to be able to come in and make plays like that and making those necessary adjustments, you know, coming from the man himself, Glenn Schumann and Kirby Smart, yeah, like you understand, like this dude is a very important piece. And you know, we don't normally see that when it comes to freshmen.
Yeah, and a true freshman is that. And what about you, Brian? When you look at what the defense was able to do to this Tigers offense, what was one maybe most impressive thing for you?
Yeah, to Jarvis's point, it was just about like replacing all of these people in the secondary, including Aguero, who had the injury later in the week. But the idea that there's no Kamari Lassiter, no Javon Bullard, no Tyke Smith, and the Dogs are able to just slide in there and do it seamlessly. It's both a credit to Bolden and Starks. The fact that, you know, Starks is able to move to this different position and Bolden just pops in there like he just looks like he belongs right away, just like Starks did in that sense. And what I like the most is he was aggressive, but he was also under control. Like the way that he would drive to make these tackles, and he had that big play early on third down too, like Jay mentioned. I mean, it was crazy to see it right away. You know, it's almost like you talk about it, you see it, you hear about it, the hype of it, but to actually have it be executed in that way, much like Starks was a couple years back.
Yeah,
it's wild that was able to happen. And then also all the injuries along the way too that happened. And I know we'll get to some of those too, but just the fact that the Dogs were able to battle through all of that, play these younger guys and have this situation and only give up 3 to what is still a really good football team. It is crazy that it went like that on Saturday.
Oh, yeah. And I saw the coolest thing, BG, where somebody posted online a side-by-side of Malachi Starks and his interception a couple seasons ago that looked identical to what we saw Saturday. And I was like, the dude is just outright scary. I mean, he's just scary good no matter where you put him on the field. And I know, speaking of that, Jarvis mentioned it just a moment ago as well. We talked about this too on our show last week. Michael Williams playing at a different position kind of this season. You know, what about that turn for Malachi Starks at the star position this past Saturday?
I mean, I think, you know, just from an injury standpoint, you know, we had Jonell Aguero, you know, like BG mentioned, he had the hamstring in the padded practice, whatever. So he was dealing with that. So I just think that, you know, for that to be an option, I don't think he's going to stay there necessarily. I'll be very interested to see how they work that in, being that, you know, this was a very good sample size of KJ Bolden playing that free safety spot. Do they move, you know, Malachi to the strong, or do they move him to the star to kind of see what that looks like going forward, you know? And that's the one thing that when you have the depth that Georgia has, and to be able to expose a quarterback, because, you know, everybody was like, oh yeah, Caleb Klubnik's coming in, his junior year, it's gonna be fun, and then you know, like, nah, he ain't it. He's not it. That's not it. He's not him. So, you know, and then you have these young guys coming in here because, you know, Jonell Gore went down. Then you saw Ja'Cory Thomas come in at the nickel spot. And I'm just like, man, so when you have teams that have this much depth and you mess around and have to be in the tub, so to speak, man, there's somebody sitting there right there waiting on to take your spot. And it's nothing personal. That's just how the game goes. And Kirby, you know, being able to put all these guys in one spot, they totally understand that. So yeah, I'm very interested to see how these snaps kind of lay out once Aguero gets back fully healthy, because we know he had won that spot outright, you know, during training camp. So yeah, I'll be interested to see how they play with that, you know, going forward.
This used to be one of those old football things where like you would never lose your starting position because of an injury. And that's just simply not true anymore, especially in this age of college football and transfers and people. Like we saw it last year at the linebacking position with Dumas Johnson. When he was out, he left. He was down. Now he's playing football at Kentucky because CJ Allen came in and they were like, ooh, he's different and looks a little bit better than he does. And just like that, it was gone. So for Aguero, you hope for his sake that, and he's going to play plenty still. But all it did, Malachi Starks just made a little bit more money on Saturday, right? Just knowing that he's able to do that. And the other thing about playing that star position, it's become so important to cover tight ends in the NFL. And you have more and more athletic tight ends and guys at the position that are at elite level, and they're starting to get. And if Starks is able to cover that position as well, on top of everything else that he's able to do, that would, he's going to be making some money off of that. The other thing with Starks, I was thinking about, T, when you were saying putting the shots side by side, of the interception, he's going to have a hell of a highlight reel when they roll the draft tape. Malachi Starks, the 12th pick out of the University of Georgia. And then you just have a couple of ridiculous interceptions that are on the same field, and it's not even his home field, which is crazy to think about. But that tape for him is going to be, people are going to be like, oh my gosh, look at this dude. So he definitely padded the tape on Saturday.
You make an excellent point, BG, because think about it, man. 75% of the time, NFL teams are in nickel anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can say, I can play nickel too, oh my gosh, man. This dude he's gonna be collecting the bag, man.
Yep.
He just driving he's driving that hype train himself. He's driving it, man. Nobody gotta hype him up. Like, he's driving that bad boy just like this. Like, y'all gonna see 17 games? Oh yeah, we're gonna be able to see it. Yep, I can play 17 games this year.
Just quietly, right? And just wanted to kind of go back to what you guys were saying. A quote from Kirby Smart on Janelle was, he said he was close to being able to play. He worked out before the game. They actually thought he might be able to go, but only in an emergency situation, and they don't really know more about him. They're just going to kind of take that day by day. So hopefully he'll be able to get back healthy. But yeah, it's a day-to-day thing, and I'm sure Dog Nation is just grateful that he is at least day-to-day, number one, and number two, that we're not talking about more serious injuries, whether that's a Warren Brinson, who they hope is going to be able to go, and of course, whether that's a Michael Williams, who they're looking at as being somebody who from he's week to week, but certainly they've got a couple of weeks where they can kind of quote unquote go without him, and hopefully get him healthy enough to be ready for maybe that Alabama game. Now, of course, so many flowers to pass around. So we got more kudos for last Saturday before we move on to this Saturday coming up in Next Up. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party, the Dogs Edition, is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Now, if you're tired after lunch, or you got a big to-do list to tackle, or even maybe before a workout, 5 Hour Energy is for you. Research shows that more than 70% of us hit the wall after lunch, for example. So 5 Hour Energy can help you to leap over that wall instead of crash over it. Also, 5 Hour Energy shots can give you the feeling of alertness and energy to get into the zone and really get things going, especially at the beginning of the week. We know it's Tuesday, but it's kind of the beginning of this work week. And I'll tell you, sometimes I've got a sun up to sundown day where I may have a podcast, and then I may have a radio show, and I may have a TV broadcast. That's a crazy day. It does happen. And for me, on days like that, I can definitely attest to 5 Hour Energy being a good look. Zero sugar, a convenient portable size, perfect pick-me-up. Also, you can go to their website, and there are so many flavors, including watermelon, tropical burst, grape, and berry, which is my favorite, by the way. But you should try them all. And if you go to that site, you can even choose to build your own 12-pack or 24-pack. So if you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5hourenergy.com, you can get some product today, and you can use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. Now, this offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders, but you can use that 20% off Locked On CFB code to get 5hourenergy.com today. Locked On Sports Today is a free 24/7 sports streaming channel that's programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the noise. Locked On Sports Today also brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So guys, before we move on, I know it's difficult, but we're not about participation trophies, so I'm going to make you guys choose one winner and one loser. Start off with you, Jarvis. Give me a winner from Saturday's 34-3 win over Clemson.
Oh my gosh. Y'all know I'm glad I went first because I'm sure BG probably gonna mention it. But man, Jalen Walker. Jalen Walker. Jalen, let me talk to you for a second, my man. But do you understand how much money you can make playing that outside linebacker / edge spot, man? Because you have a talent that cannot be taught, sir. You are exceptional when it comes to being disruptive. And that's what NFL teams look for, man. They pay a lot of money. I'm talking about, I think Brian Burns making about $28 million a year. Come on, man. What we talk about here, dog? So, hey, like tell coach, like I understand y'all got this plan for me. Y'all gonna develop me. Y'all gonna get me to the league, all that stuff. But coach, Michael out a little bit. You know what I'm saying? We ain't got to compete for no snaps. I could be on the field at the same time whenever Michael get hurt, get hurt. But Michael, man, take your time, bro. Take your time. Take your time. Let me get get well. No rush. Let me get this money first, and then you come on back, and then we'll talk about have a conversation about what we're gonna do. Stand up, outside linebacker. We can have that conversation down the road. But let me get to this money first. But yes, my winner is Jalen Walker. 1,000 times out of 1,000 T, because he is that dude. I'm telling you, he's just it just makes me so happy to see him out there just causing havoc against the Clemson Tigers, which we know is coached by Dabo Swinney, who I feel like it is time for him to go ahead and go right off into the sunset, sir.
Yeah, you and a lot of people, Jarvis.
Man.
Kind of put a stamp on that to say, hey, I'm gonna, start that farewell party for you a little bit early here.
Yeah, farewell tour. Yeah, it's
exactly. That farewell tour kind of sort of started Saturday, I feel like. But who for you, Brian, was that guy who you said, you know what? Yeah, there were some goods, even some greats, but he was the greatest on Saturday.
There's fewer things I enjoy of our conversations in this podcast than when Jarvis gets to talk about someone in the front seven. Like he just lights up. Like it's like giving a little kid a piece of candy or something. Jarvis just changes his bulb. It goes off and just like, all right, this is my guy. I can talk about him and just dive in there. The other thing we need to, maybe it's us that it needs to start it, like a get the bag tracker. We were just talking about Malachi making some money on Saturday, being able to play the nickel, right? Like, what is the projected money that Jalen Walker made for himself on Saturday, going from this to that, and who knows what it might be for the rest of the season? It was very difficult to pick one winner. I had Jalen Walker at the top of my list, so I had to cross him out, as Jarvis was talking about him a minute ago. I'll go with just who's second on here, and that's the freshman Nate Frazier. It was hard to not be impressed by what you saw from him. And they realized in the second half that he needs to be the one that gets the ball. I also thought, like, they just didn't get it going in the first half with Branson. I didn't think he really looked bad. Some people thought he didn't have any holes to run into. He got hit behind the line multiple times in that first half. But Frazier has a different level of go for him. I mean, a lot of comparisons to Swift on Saturday. He looked really, really good. So he's going to be in the mix pretty heavily when ETN comes back. And I think he kind of maybe secured himself as potentially RB2 in the mix of all of this. So, and the other thing that was interesting is that Kirby had said before the game that with ETN, it may not necessarily be a one-game suspension. There's a chance that he's out at Tennessee Tech as well. So maybe we see a lot more Frazier, but he earned himself a lot more playing time and a lot more carries moving forward the rest of this season.
Which I think was interesting because I think we started off in one place maybe 2 weeks ago, but by last week we all kind of had a consensus, at least on this show, that we thought it would be a half a game. And so, like you said, now we're kind of interested to see where this is going to go when they take on Tennessee Tech this upcoming weekend. But hey, like I said, we had a winner and a loser from this show, from Atlanta Football Party Dogs edition, but the SEC also had some winners, if you will, good damn dogs for the week. We'll talk about those guys in just a second. But when I say loser, I don't know if we can really pick a loser, Jarvis, because I don't know if anybody played that poorly to be called a loser, but maybe the guy that we'll kind of say could improve in week 2 of the regular season for Georgia.
I'm going to go with the group. I'm going to go with the offensive line, right? But we know that we saw some improvement at halftime, right? And Carson Beck was leading the charge. He was like, "Hey, coach, we about to come out and score in this second half." Because when you understand when your leader comes out and says those things, you don't have to call anybody out individually. As a group, here's what we need to do. and they went out and actually did that. So I would say the offensive line, just for a little bit, it was a delayed winner, right? If I could say that, if I could use that. So, loser / delayed winner, it has to be the offensive line for me, because you understood, you saw those guys on film, you knew what to expect. Those guys Clemson was going to bring it at least up on that defensive line. If anything else, that defensive line was going to bring it, and they brought it to them. And some of those guys, if we talking about a bag tracker, BG, Mr. Woods, that bag tracker is up.
Yes.
The arrow is up and it's green for sure.
No, 100%. That's a good call with the offensive line there. For me, I wrote down a couple actually, which it was hard at first, and then I started to think about it. And I'm going to go with two guys that just didn't play and maybe got kind of skipped on playing time based on that. Roderick Robinson, like him coming back. Take your time, young man, because I don't know. I mean, if Etienne's in this mix and Frazier's in this mix and Branson's in this mix, you're RB3 at best, maybe RB4. Cash Jones also played a good amount, and you could tell that the coaches trusted him the most in pass pro situations there too. So if it's not Etienne, it might be Cash Jones in passing downs situation. So for him, I think it was tough. And same thing with Aguero. I mean, he's going to play plenty coming back, but in that sense of, what if they want Bolden on the field and to put Starks at the nickel or mix it in a good bit because they trust Jackson because he's been there for, he's getting his doctorate now on year 6. And, so he's doing that whole thing. And he played pretty well on Saturday too. And then one other name for me was just because there was so much conversation about him in the offseason is Dom Lovett, in the sense of, the idea of him being like alpha male, going to get fed all these targets. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be this spread, 6 to 10 guys catching the ball, everybody getting involved. Colby Young, Humphreys, Aron Smith, we saw plenty. Dylan Bell, who left with cramps. Like this wide receiving core is deep, and I don't think there's going to be necessarily an alpha on this receiving core like we thought Dom might be heading into the season.
Yeah, because with Bell leaving the game due to cramps, I mean, we didn't blink. Like I kind of sort of, and no offense, but I kind of sort of forgot that moment happened. And then to your earlier point about the O-line being losers, Jarvis, well, hey, Kirby Smart kind of agreed with you because there was a question about Michael Morris and he was like, yeah, practice better. And
Interesting.
Yeah. So, Kirby shots fired.
T, one point on with the like Dylan Bell going down and didn't miss a beat. It's also got to be another just dig at Dabo a little bit. Not that it was done on purpose, but like London Humphreys coming in, a transfer player who made a big impact on the game. Actually led Georgia in receiving in this one. Only had the 2 grabs, but found his way into the end zone. But it's like, imagine someone like that on Clemson's roster who needs help at wide receiver. Like the fact you're not even in the mix for that in that conversation is silly. And the broadcast too. Sean McDonough and Greg McElroy did a good job in the middle of the fourth quarter, kind of saying like, all right, maybe it's transfer portal time here, Dabo, which people have been telling them for forever. But the fact that that's where they got to on the broadcast about 6-7 minutes to go, it's a pretty telltale sign.
And need something to talk about, BG.
Yeah, right. Gotta fill. It's a 30-point game. We got to fill.
Yeah. And it was, it was right there for the taking because that game was, as we talked about last week and even on the post game, like literally it was a referendum on going with the transfer portal and allowing it to supplement your team and continue to make it great and give it depth versus what we saw on the other side of the football. But good damn dogs for the week are actually dogs that we have seen from the beginning of their careers on through at Georgia. And that, of course, is SEC Offensive Player of the Week, Carson Beck, who connected on 23 of 33 passes, 278 yards, 2 touchdowns, and even added a 13-yard run on the ground to help UGA pile up 447 total yards, no turnovers. And Peyton Woodring, who drilled a career-long 55-yarder, the first time that the Dogs had seen that in a game since 2018. But as we wrap up, guys, just one quick thing that you want to see this Georgia team improve upon as they get set for week 2 against Tennessee Tech.
Quick start. That's it.
Boom.
That's all I do.
Offensive line play, like Jarvis said, they were kind of losers. I want to see them come out and just maul people right from the get-go and get Branson Robinson going. Be more efficient early and often in between the tackles, rushing the football.
Thanks to our everydayers for making the Atlanta Football Party your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by Locked On Bulldogs for your second, and be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're also free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you on the Atlanta Sports Party Thursday.